Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This one is a little bit different of a take. I'm actually going to do two today. I've got another special one I'm going to do later. But right now I want to talk about the national championship game and how it felt to be a fan with the Georgia Bulldogs and losing. Now, many people could say, well, I'm about to cry over spilt milk, or, it's okay because I also root for Notre Dame and Boise State, so I should just be happy with that. And let me get into that real quick. Some people could say, well, how can you have more than one team? As you can see, the Bills banner behind me and the Falcons hat. It's just the way I am. When I was little, I got into football. I automatically gravitated toward Buffalo because of their colors, the red, white, and blue. And then a year later, I picked up on Atlanta when they drafted Deion Sanders. So that's how I ended up with two teams in the NFL. And from there, I picked two teams in Major League Baseball, in the NBA and the NHL. One from each conference or league, so I could have a dream World Series. Now, don't get me wrong, the Buffalo Bills are my team. When the Bills play the Falcons, I root for the Bills. The good thing about the NFL is it happens so rarely. In NBA, the Bulls and Spurs play twice a year. In the NHL, the Sabres and Flames play twice a year. And in Major League Baseball, the Braves and Red Sox have been playing a series, a home-and-home series, for the last probably 10 years. So it happens a lot. Now, in college football, Georgia and Notre Dame have only met twice in my lifetime, and once I was 10 months old. I don't remember it. Which gets me back to the Georgia Bulldogs in the national championship game. I have been a part, as a fan, of some of the most devastating championship losses one could have. Super Bowl 25 as an 11-year-old kid was really hard to handle. But I was 11. And I don't, when Scott Norwood missed that kick, I just sat there stunned, and I cried. I was 11, I can admit it. That kind of thing doesn't happen now. I can differentiate sport from everything else and understand that it's not the end of the world. When Atlanta lost the Super Bowl to New England last year in such a matter of blowing a 28-3 lead, it was hard. I sat there in a house full of guests just stunned. And of course, my New England Patriot loving sister-in-law, the phone rang as soon as the game ended. But that's her right. As is anybody's. Like last night, when the final play happened and the touchdown pass was recorded, I was in an empty house this time, as it's a Monday night, a weeknight, and, I just sat there stunned. That game last night was a virtual replay of the Super Bowl. You had the team from Georgia wearing black and red, building a big lead, only to blow it to the team that is basically the evil empire of its sport in this era, and losing in overtime. Now, I've seen some fans complaining about the face mask that wasn't called, or the offsides on the blocked punt, or the non-offsides and such. Listen, there was a lot more than those flags that cost Georgia that game. Leading 20-7, they get an interception and immediately throw it back. Or how about with 9.5 to go, leading 20-10 and running up the middle, and then all of a sudden getting a third down and overthrowing a swing pass. Or the next drive, running the wild dog and it wasn't working and continuing to run it. Or when the game was tied, not being able to stop Alabama as they marched right down the field for the game-winning field goal that luckily, thankfully, was missed. And then in overtime, you get your shot, you kick a field goal. You give them theirs, you sack them for a 16-yard loss, and then go into cover two, and then the safety doesn't get over. There were so many things that happened last night that cost Georgia the game. It wasn't just one thing. Give it up to Alabama. They were the better team. But how does a fan get over this, especially in a sport where you know that it's so hard to make it to such a level because you got to rely on fan voting? I mean, I talked about Notre Dame earlier. Notre Dame lost that early season game to Georgia, which, by the way, I was rooting for Georgia because they are my number one team. And, Notre Dame was behind the 8 ball the rest of the way, but they built back up only to lose to Miami in devastating fashion. Georgia, they come out hot. They're destroying teams. They're blowing teams out. They lose to Auburn, and then nobody wants to talk about them again. the rest of the way. They're no longer any good. They were number one. They get blown out by Auburn. Everybody talk about Alabama, Oklahoma, the big schools, Miami, the schools that get all the press. I can only imagine if USC had been undefeated, how they would have been talked about. As it was, they still were talked about with their quarterback just being, a top draft prospect. But Georgia fought its way back. They get in the SEC title game and nobody gives them a shot. And they whoop Auburn right off the field. They go to the Rose Bowl and nobody gives them a shot. Baker Mayfield in Oklahoma, Heisman Trophy winner. And Georgia fought a great, great game. And then last night, I remember seeing all over, oh, Alabama's going to blow them out. Alabama's going to whoop the floor with them. They've got no chance. Well, Georgia put up a hell of a game. They just didn't follow through. So, but I want to address the feeling of losing that game. I sat there stunned. It's only been about 20 hours, but I sit here just thinking the what ifs. And the beautiful thing about football is I get to think about that until last week of August. Congratulations to the Alabama fans. I know a couple on my friends list. They've made sure they've tagged me. Buffalo is out of the playoffs. They've got some work to do, especially at quarterback. The Atlanta Falcons go to Philadelphia this week, so you know who I'll be rooting for. I would love to see something different in the AFC. And by different, I mean Pittsburgh. I know it's not that different. They won 6 Super Bowls. But my buddy's a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, so I'd love to see Atlanta and Pittsburgh. What I think is going to happen, Minnesota and New England. I got another Vinny's Take to do later. It's an important one to me. It's a special one for a topic involving a friend of mine. So I'll be back on probably 10 p.m. Eastern or so with Vinny's Take number 11. Until then, enjoy sports. It's now, hockey season, basketball season. Soon, pitchers and catchers will be reporting. Sports never ends. Plus, we got the Olympics coming up. Go USA.